Okay, moving on into Cubase here, you can see we have some guitar pieces here. I already have them all recorded and edited up and everything, so I won't cover any of that in this video, but I'll just go ahead and play this back so you can hear the tone in the context of the entire mix, and yeah, we'll break it down. Okay, so I also muted the bass at the end here. You could probably hear that. And I'll play it again for you here in a second, but you'll hear just how much the bass impacts the entire guitar tone. It's very important, and it's crucial. It's often overlooked by a lot of younger and newer producers getting into rock and metal production, where they're like, oh, one sounds weird. You can't have one without the other. So anyways, I won't get too far into that. Bass is extremely important to the entire overall architecture of guitar, quote unquote, tone. It supports it. Anyhow, the guitars by themselves, I'll play that really quick. Okay, so you can see that it's just your typical, or you can hear that it's just your typical kind of thrashy, a little darker, but it still maintains a relative kind of tightness to it. The way I got that was by using an overdrive pedal. I also used JST clip before that just to warm up the tone a little bit. And I'll actually bypass all these so you can hear what the DI itself without any processing sounds like. It's, you know, obviously it's a drastic difference. First in the chain, we got JST clip adding a little extra warmth. I'll show you guys what that sounds like just by itself, without and with. It's making the signal just a bit bigger, a little bit louder, a little bit warmer. It helps overall with the distortion. From there, I have a Tube Screamer virtual pedal here, also by Ignite Amps. These guys make great stuff. It's all free and it sounds amazing. Some of the best stuff on the market, in my opinion. This is without. We're starting to get a little bit of crunch there. I have the tone pushed up fairly high. Same with the sweep. The sweep I just kind of played with, so I kind of disregard that, you know, for the most part. But the drive needs to be kept a little bit lower to keep the tone cleaner and not super over distorted and oversaturated. And then we move into Emissary here. Common thing, but it's an easy fix, is people they load up an amp like this and they expect it to be like instant amazingness, and they don't realize that it doesn't have cabinet simulation built in or an IR loader built in or anything. It comes bundled with one, if depending on where you buy it, or not buy it, but it's a free download, which is great. Sounds amazing. Yeah, it's free. Can't complain, right? But you can get this NadIR or NadIR, depending on which way you want to pronounce that. You can get this for free. Also with these killer impulse responses, they're amazing. I've used them in several mixes. They just sound great. And you can obviously load your own if you want to make your own, or you buy other ones or whatever, or swap them with friends, whatever you do, you can do that. And you have all these extra controls to shape the IR and stuff. But I'll get into what IR is here in a second for those that don't know and maybe aren't so familiar with impulse responses. First, covering the actual amp. This will sound really gross and really, yeah, just really gross. So beware. This is without and then with. Obviously, it's starting to sound more like a guitar tone as you would normally hear it, but it sounds off. It sounds really digital, really fizzy, and you know, that's where amp sims kind of get a little bit of flack. And it used to be a much larger issue back in the past, but these past couple years, it's almost indistinguishable in context of a full mix. Especially if you treat them and process them right, it's fantastic. Anyhow, This guy's really good with clean channels and lead channels and rhythm channels and stuff like that. We'll add this impulse response loader. I have this guy mixed going on. It's that kind of a null mix thing. This guy's at 0 dB with an SM57 point at the center of a 4x12, and then this guy's on that same 4x12 with a 44.1U off axis, and I have that pulled down about 1.4 dB. And obviously without, and then with. Oh, so much better. That actually sounds like a guitar tone, right? And then just to top it all off, I have a little bit of compression going on. Just to kind of thicken it up a bit. Smooth it out, make it more mix ready. Again, it's important that you experiment with these things and find what works for you, because there's so many options, and even if you were working with the real thing, there's still a lot of trial and error and experimentation. What's great about working in the box and in software like this is, A, it's more affordable and it's cheaper and it's easier to access, but it also doesn't take up all this time and space trying to hook up mics and switch everything out. It's a different experience though. Both are really great, but I guess this is a good time to explain what IRs and where they kind of come into place. An IR, or an impulse response, basically uses these tiny little audio files to place and imprint over an existing signal, such as a guitar amp sim like this, which is a virtual amp simulator. You can think of this as a virtual cabinet simulator. Even though it doesn't look like a cabinet, most of these kind of plugins don't, but the way IRs work is it captures the sound of the mic, the sound of the room, and the sound of the speaker cabinet in that room, and captures it into a very condensed small blip audio file. And all that information is retained in these audio files. And just for experimentation's sake, I'll just play the guitars back here, and I'll just swap some of these out and you'll hear a difference. It's essentially, swapping these out is like swapping out microphones, positioning, and even speakers themselves in some case. Essentially what IRs do though is they're going to do the same exact thing as guitar cabinets, and that is, for every mic, every position, every speaker model and cab model, you're going to get a different result, and even in every room. So you could have a lot of fun with this. I'll just play this back and you guys can get maybe a decent idea of what I'm talking about there. Anyhow, it's subtle because I'm only using these built-in impulse responses, and they are all of the same model, it looks like. So but you'll still get various differences, because even if it was recorded in the same room, same model of cab, the mics are going to be different. There's 3 different mics in 2 different positionings of each mic. Still offers tons of different tonal varieties, and your cab choice or your impulse response choice is going to be fundamentally, in my opinion, the most important thing in your guitar tone process, and it's really what's going to make your guitar tone sound like real good slamming tones, or wimpy, thin, harsh, whatever, or maybe they're too dark or whatever. So good IRs are a must. In an engineering state, they really, really are helpful because they allow engineers and producers to work faster, and artists as well, just to work faster, quicker, and cheaper, because, you know, they're not having to deal with all this gear to lug around and buy, and thousands and thousands and thousands, unless you're making them, of course. But for the most part, you know, what's out there is extremely good, and you can have plenty of tonal variety at your fingertips. It's pretty awesome. Much quicker than getting up into the other room and adjusting mics, swapping out mics, adding additional mics, stuff. You know, it's a different vibe completely. It's both fun, but this is much quicker, and it could be better during the writing process and mixing process as well. Moving on down here into the rhythm section, you can see I do have a little bit extra processing going on. I have a frequency, and you'll be able to see that right here, which is doing some pretty drastic EQ moves. Some of it's subtle, you know, like we have a little bit of a boost of about, you know, a dB or 2 around 2.3K or so. The biggest difference here is getting some of the harshness out of this top end. If I play this without this EQ, you'll see what I mean. I just kind of rolled back the top end a little bit, even though it wasn't really too bad, so to speak. Of course, this is all subjective and due to preference and stuff like that, but usually there's just a little bit too much quackiness or fizziness going on around 4 to 5K, so I'd kind of drop a little bit of that out, especially because it was fighting with the vocals. It's just to kind of play that in context of a mix. If I play this without, doesn't sound bad, but something's a little off, you know? That sounds more polished, a little bit thicker, a little bit more fitting. You guys get the idea. EQ is exceptionally important to guitar tone as well, because in a mix standpoint, it's how everything is going to fit. Most of you guys probably already know that, but it's worth noting just as a reminder. After that, I have a limiter, and this is another great limiter by JST Tones called Finality Advanced. They have two versions of this limiter. You could literally use almost any limiter. So with Finality, what's going on here is really just crushing the guitars a little bit more. It's kind of hard to hear that because this plugin has a little bit of an issue with Cubase, but it still works pretty good. It's interesting because I almost feel like it adds a little extra something to the top end, and it's very pleasant, and I like it. Anyhow, just using a limiter to really just crunch everything. If we move down here on the guitar bus where everything's routed to, I still have a little bit more processing. You can see this right here. If I take all these off too, the biggest thing is I have a little bit of extra EQ going on. I'm taking off a little bit of 2700 or 3K around there, and just an ever so slight 1.8 dB of around 200, just to make room for that bass and to make everything kind of have a little bit of cohesive space, because that's just the way I like to mix. Then we also have a Soundtoys plugin, really unnecessary, but I like the sound of this plugin on group buses such as guitar and bass groups. This is what it's like without it. Super subtle stuff, but it adds just an extra bit of warmth, and it's pleasant. A lot of small, subtle moves, and most of these are mixing moves, like this EQ and stuff. Those are all mixing moves, because I just didn't like the way that extra bit of bite was sounding there. You could hear it whistle a little bit, depending on your monitoring. I also have a H-comp here by Waves, and this is just doing the final compression duties here. This is what it's like without, and then with. Really tightens it up and glues everything. After that, I just balanced the volume into the mix, and I had a mix-ready tone, and I was very pleased with that. Anyhow, I hope you guys liked that. I hope it maybe was helpful to some of you who are either curious or maybe interested in getting involved into metal production or rock music production or anything like that. Something that might be helpful to people that want to do some nice riffage and mixing and whatever you want in the box. So yeah, that's how my personal workflow works for guitars, and it's a very similar process for bass, but I can do a separate one for bass because it is slightly different. But anyways, yeah, there you guys have it. You guys take care.